Paranormal King Radio Network, bringing you the best paranormal hosts and guests. Bringing you the best paranormal shows and features. Playing the top musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. With the best paranormal hosts and guests. The best in paranormal shows and features. Playing the best musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same.
You are listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team. Brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network and hosted by Frank Lee. Join us for the next hour as we discuss ghosts, spirits, hauntings, and otherworldly phenomena that has yet to be explained in hopes of finding answers. This show is meant to be a resource for those of you who, like us, seek to find answers to the unknown. We hope you find it informative and enjoy the show. Once again, thank you for listening.
Welcome to Paranormalities and Ponderings. I'm your host, Frank Lee. Thank you for tuning in tonight. I've got a special guest for you tonight. It's Holly Joy. Holly, how are you tonight?
I'm great, Frank. Thank you.
Well, good. So, I appreciate you coming on the show. I've been looking to this ever since we had talked about you coming on and being a guest, because you're a psychic, an intuitive, you're a mentor, and although I've always been a hardcore science guy, that is something that, like we were talking about just a few minutes ago, it's just like ghosts, spirits, etc., that I've seen enough evidence of it that even though scientifically I haven't seen the proof on paper that they exist, I've seen the proof with my own experiences that they exist. And I've seen too many things for it to be chalked up to coincidence about psychics and mediums. And those abilities have to be real, and it's fascinating. So, hopefully we get to pick your brain for a little while.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show, and I look forward to answering some questions and hope that I can be beneficial to your listeners tonight.
Well, that is great. I was thinking about it when we first mentioned doing the show and having a psychic on the show. One thing that really comes to mind is, there's so many things that you see. For one, I feel that psychics, like a lot of paranormal investigators, I feel they probably have to deal with this certain stigma that they face. But unlike a paranormal investigator where we say, hey, I want to do this, with those abilities, first it comes to the realization of, hey, there's something different about me than everyone else. So what was it that led you to realize that you were different, or you could do things that weren't exactly normal or that other people couldn't do?
Well, when I was a child, I had experiences. I would see things or feel things, but growing up in a Christian home, any experiences I had were discarded or a cause of concern. And that conditioning led me to suppress these feelings of being different until adulthood.
Right.
In my 20s, I took an interest in the paranormal, and doing this brought back the seeing and hearing that had come and gone throughout my life. And what was different this time is that I chose to embrace what was happening to me and started to put myself out there in a way that others could validate my impressions. But even then, even after I knew this was my calling,
Mm-hmm.
I still was not convinced. I required a lot of validation. Then I had a vision that I was in a car with my kids, and it was winter, and I lost control of the car, and an unseen force filled the car and protected us.
Wow.
And then, 2 weeks later, this happened.
Oh
And it
my
happened
God.
in such a perfect way. Yeah, no one was hurt. My car was undamaged. And from then on, I've always trusted what information was offered to me.
So when you say you had this vision, I mean, this was literally in a prophetic sense, and you just didn't realize it when you had it.
Right.
So, wow, that is absolutely amazing. So that kind of led you to think, there's, I'm sure that definitely cleared up any doubts in itself. And
It did.
I'm sure, like you'd mentioned, growing up in a Christian home. I also grew up in a Christian home myself. I actually a preacher's kid, and so I can imagine some of the stigma that you probably faced with some of that, and I imagine when you first started coming into it, it was probably shunned, and you were probably told to leave it alone quite a bit, if I had to guess.
Yeah, it was a lot of, you just need more sleep. I heard
Right.
that a lot. Yeah.
Right. Well, do you feel that you were born with those abilities, or did you develop them after maybe a particular event in your life or an occurrence?
I feel that I was born empathic, sensitive to the feelings of those around me, and empathy is a primary sense that I work with now. So yes, I feel I was born with some psychic sense, but that I would not be able to help people the way that I do now had I not embraced this calling and actively worked towards psychic development.
Right. So definitely kind of like you were born with a natural ability, but it was just like anything else. You might have had this ability, but you had to develop it and train yourself just like with anything else.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, that something that that makes me that reminds me of something that I've talked about with many people who talk about having extrasensory abilities. Um, many of them talk about developing them, trying to get it so that they can control it. A lot of people that I've talked to want to get it to the point where they can just develop it enough to block it out. Some people embrace it and love it. Others feel that they don't want it. They wish it never happened. So personally, do you feel that your abilities are more of a blessing to you or a curse?
Um, so as an adult, I feel like an entirely different person. Like I open my body up to whatever my soul wishes to experience in this lifetime.
Hmm.
And giving readings and mentoring others with psychic development is what brings me my greatest excitement. So I'm happy and I would not choose to live any other way. I feel blessed, but not that these abilities are a blessing in a way that makes me special.
Right. So that's powerful. That you consider them a blessing, but not in a sense of, hey, look at me, look what I can do, but hey, look what I can do to help people. Look how I can use this, how I can put it to work.
Yeah, it's all about being in service to others.
And that is commendable. That is, very admirable, and that's one of the things that I feel like there isn't enough of in the world today. So I definitely commend you for that.
Thank you.
So and something I'd kind of touched on a few minutes ago, about stigmas or criticisms. I'm sure that you faced them growing up. I can only imagine, like you had mentioned, being born with these abilities. I can imagine childhood was probably strange, to say the least.
It was confusing. Yeah.
Right. I can imagine that was a challenge in itself, and I know even today, I see a lot of psychics called into question, and many I feel are called into question unfairly. Um, I, and then on the other side of the house, I see some that I kind of wonder about myself. Typically, they were the ones that we seen working for the 900 line back in the 90s,
Hmm.
and but that goes back to what you were just saying, though. It's what is their motivation? What's theirs being used for? But what I was going to ask you is, what type of stigmas or criticisms have you faced throughout your life because of these abilities?
Um, well, the most recent was an online comment on one of our social pages that went on about how psychics are either conned or mentally ill, and it went on to petition the government to pass a law that puts anyone that does psychic work in prison and have their assets collected and given back to their clients or, in his words, victims.
Wow.
And I agree with you, yeah, that some psychics or people claiming to be psychics are con artists. And I'll touch base on this a little further in the show.
Hmm.
But for those that feel all psychics are criminals and should be punished by law, I would like to point out there are several documented cases where government agencies have utilized psychics, remote viewers, and channelers.
Hmm.
The first one I feel worth mentioning is the Society for Enlightenment and Transformation, or SEAT. This is organized within the United Nations. And here, Lee Carroll, who channeled a higher dimensional being named Quran, and many others, have been invited to channel information that has been taken into consideration when it comes to making our world a better place. And also, there's a blind woman named Mary Ann Shinenfield, and she claimed that without eyes, she could read, watch TV, and orbit space.
Wow.
And yeah, she was studied extensively by NASA and ultimately tested by being asked to find a specific satellite orbiting in space and read the serial numbers, which she did, and
Wow.
consequently now works for NASA. Yep, saving them unspeakable time, money, and resources.
That is, I mean, just amazing doesn't cover it. That's
Yeah.
But you bring up such an excellent point there. When you're talking about the Society for Enlightenment and Transformation, that this is an organization recognized by the United Nations, and this isn't the first time that that's happened. We were talking just a few minutes ago about the Stargate project back in the 70s, and that went on through the 70s, up through the 80s, on into the early 90s, that the U.S. government spent all this money on psychic research. They were doing like you were talking about with Marianne Seinfeld, who was using her abilities for NASA. They were looking in and researching remote viewing as a way of espionage to spy on other countries, to potentially not have to send the spy into the danger zone, but to have them
Mm-hmm.
seated in a room comfortably, but gather the intel that they need from a safe location. And not only that, but get places that a person physically couldn't get. And this went on for years and years. Um, we'd even mentioned the book that Lloyd Arbach and Ed May and I can't remember the other gentleman's name, that they've been working on about the ESP wars, as they called it, that were not only the U.S., but there's been other countries that have done psychic research as well, and tried to use it from a military standpoint. The the military, our the CIA. I mean, there's so many legitimate agencies that are looking into this. It makes you take notice. So
Definitely. It's very interesting research for those that enjoy this topic, case studies and things of that nature.
right, and not only that, but for someone, when even if someone is skeptical of of psychics, or maybe they're not sure if it's real or not. If you take someone like me who is hardcore, loves science, loves to really dig and see how things tick. I mean, that is fascinating to me because these are documented cases that, like you had mentioned with Marianne Schneider. I'm so glad you brought her up because that is such a compelling case. How is a woman, it would be different in other situations, but it's no secret how closely NASA guards their information, because
Mm-hmm.
to let their information leak out, that's a matter of national security. And for her to be able to call off serial numbers off of a satellite in space, I mean, that's, phenomenal. And so that's something that people have to look into. There is something there.
Absolutely.
And my take on this, you know, it this is where my frustration with science comes. And this is why I was so excited to have you on the show, because what you're doing, science doesn't understand it yet. So a lot of science wants to write it off as, well, we don't understand it, so it's not real. Same thing we face in the paranormal side of the house. And if you look at it, though, how long ago was it that the Earth was the center of the universe? And
Right.
that was absolute scientific fact. The Earth was the center of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't very long before that, the Earth was flat, and that was accepted as scientific fact. If you went too far, you were going to fall off the face of the Earth. And just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it's not real. So
Right.
so anyway, you know you I'm like a kid in a candy store here. You've got me, I've got like a million questions I want to ask you, and so I'm gonna try and not get sidetracked anymore. But I that was just something that when you mentioned, when you mentioned Seat and Marianne Scheinfeld, that just made my mind just click, and I had to, I really had to bring that up. But and talking about, the government's actually taking it serious enough to look into doing all this research. And then you've got your skeptics, of course, who think that, like you had mentioned, every someone saying that everyone that says they're a psychic is a con artist and everything else. There, it creates a lot of confusion. And if there is one thing I've learned in 14 years in the paranormal field, it's, if nothing else, I've learned that people pay too much attention to what's on TV. And TV is the breeding ground for misconceptions. And so that's something that I was going to ask you about is, what are some of the common misconceptions about psychic abilities that you run into on a regular basis that maybe you would like to address and clear up and, maybe set the record straight?
Yeah, well, back to the idea of skeptics. Some people think that psychics are mind readers, but they are not.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to test me by asking, what's my birthday? How many fingers am I holding up?
Right.
And when they ask questions like this, I know that they don't understand what a psychic is.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is I pick up on my clients' dominant feelings. If someone is happy, depressed, anxious, they send off a signal that I read energetically and gather impressions about utilizing my senses of seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing. But unless we have a telepathic connection, I would have no way to access what you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing would be that psychics know the future. For me, a timeline reading is about gathering impressions and mapping the most likely outcome at the time of the reading.
Right.
However, we all have free will and thus several probable future timelines, meaning that your future is not set in stone.
I would agree.
And lastly, that psychics are psychics all of the time. Being psychic is like being able to listen to a radio and hear a song playing. When I do a reading, I tune into my client's station and hear the song being broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm done with my client, I leave their station and turn off the radio.
That's a great analogy. I've never heard it explained that way, but that's a good way of putting it. And there first, like when you mentioned what's my birthday or how many fingers am I holding up, that's that reminds me, so many times I've heard the expression, well, if psychics are real, why have you never seen in the newspaper, psychic wins the lottery, and things like that?
It has been, actually, once I know of. But, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right. And, and, so that, and a lot of that is from, from the remarks I've heard like that. And then from the people that I know personally who do have abilities, I see such a clash of there's just so much misinformation between the two groups of people. I see people that think that, just because someone is a psychic that they're practicing witchcraft or they're into black magic or, just so many things that, it's really it's really unreal. And like you had mentioned, people just clearly don't seem to understand how the psychic abilities work to begin with. And
Yeah, I have been asked about, I've had people assume that I understand magic and things, and I just have to tell them, I'm sorry, it's not my area.
Right. Right. And I do like the analogy that you used about it being about the way that what they're putting off is what you're receiving. And that actually clarifies that quite a bit, because that's something I've always wondered about as well, is when you are doing those readings, what that is that you're picking up. And that's a question I've always had personally myself, so I thank you for answering that, because that makes so much sense to me. So that was a great way to explain that.
Good.
So, but do you feel that having these abilities, would you say that it's had a positive or a negative impact on your life overall?
Well, I feel I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing, and It has been and continues to be a very rewarding journey for me. So I feel that having these abilities has affected my personal growth in a positive way. My only concern that I have is that I have 2 boys, so I worry about how this could affect them during their school years.
Right.
But I just try to trust that they'll experience what their souls wish to experience during this time.
Right. I can definitely understand that. Being a parent myself, I, I've kind of been concerned a little bit because I've got 2 daughters, and of course, most of their friends think it's cool that their dad's a paranormal investigator. They're half, especially now that they're older. One's in high school, one's in junior high, and now half their friends are like, "Oh, well, I want to go along too," but but that but yeah, I can definitely see from the way you're explaining that. I can see where it would have a positive impact on you, and would help with your personal growth because of the way that you've talked about that you're employing this ability. You're not using it for personal gain. You're using this to help others. And you're teaching others how you're helping them with their abilities as well. You're mentoring these people, and I've seen so many things from the Across the Realms website, and so I can definitely see that. Now, there's not many people that you run into that are genuinely about helping people, and so it's very refreshing to see that. And
Thank you.
well, you're quite welcome. We that's what I want to highlight. There's a lot of shows that cover a lot of things, and we try to find the people that are doing things right. They're making a positive impact, and so bring those people in, and people that our listeners can learn from. And of course, there's definitely the ones out there that aren't like you, who are obviously fake, who are out for profit, who are taking advantage of people. And I figure if anybody would know how to spot a fake psychic, I would ask a real psychic if there was a way to spot a fake one.
There is. First and foremost, the client is looking for validation, and with any reading, you should walk away with information that only you can validate. And if you're worried about getting a cold reading, I always suggest that you start with an email reading. That way, the psychic cannot read your body language or gauge your reactions. Second, you want to watch out for psychics that may even have psychic abilities and give you an accurate reading, but then claim that you're in danger, claim that you've been cursed, or claim that you have a dark energy around you and want you to pay more than the initial reading to remove the curse, pray for you, or purchase materials to protect you. This is either a dark worker or a scam that many people unfortunately fall prey to. And my suggestion in this case is to walk away, or at the very least, get a second opinion from a psychic with a good public reputation. It's very rare, but in the instance that a client has a negative attachment, an actual light worker will help you remove it free of charge. Lastly, if you see a psychic with an obvious fake name, Madam So-and-so, like that, if you Google the psychic's name, you should be able to find a professional mention of them.
That's great advice. And you really, I mean, you covered so much right there just in itself, because that's something I'd never considered, and that is such an excellent idea, because there's so much training, even in a basic psychology course, like you'd mentioned, reading body language. That the email reading, that's an excellent idea. because you can pick up so much from someone's body language that you might be able to fake your way through it, even if you have no abilities. So
Hmm.
that's an excellent point. And what you were talking about the ones that are claiming you're in danger and wanting to sell you these charms and these materials to protect you, and I've ran into so many cases of that over the years. I can't count how many times I've seen that my own self. And people who would come to us, first they would go to the little corner shop and go in there and ask for help, and they would pay just tons of money, and they're already paying tons of money just for a reading. Then they're told they're in danger. They're panicked. They don't know what to do, who to turn to, and they're told they've got to buy this charm for this protection, but it's only good for this protection, so they've got to buy this charm as well. So they leave. They're upset. Their emotions are getting the best of them. They come back a couple weeks later. They're still in a frenzy of panic, and well, so they pay for another reading and end up buying, more charms, or it's a
Yeah.
cycle, and I've seen that so many times. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That is such an excellent point there, that I've seen that scam in person, and it's never good, because by the time that those people get to someone who is legitimate, who is credible, it's hard for them to trust anyone. And there's that seed of
Right.
doubt and that seed of fear that's been planted in them. And so I'm so glad that you addressed that. And I definitely understand and agree with the fake name. Is if I would agree with that 100%. If you're credible, you're going to use a real name. You're going to be noteworthy of it.
Right.
So so, so that's excellent point. Now, something that I've heard speculated many times, and this is something I've wondered about. I've heard so many opinions on both sides of the argument. So I figured I would ask you: do you think that psychic abilities are something that are genetic, that maybe run in just a family bloodline that only certain people are born with? Or is that something that you think that all of us have that ability, but maybe some of us are just naturally more adept at utilizing them?
Yeah, I disagree with the idea of psychic abilities being genetic. I feel that if you grow up in a spiritual home where these ideas are embraced, then you're more likely to have several generations of psychics. But I believe that everyone has a capacity, and if they wish to, can expand their intuitive nature.
Okay, that's great. So, um, what when and I know you being a mentor, I know you probably do have quite a few people come to you for advice, and I imagine that's something that you've been asked many times over the years. If I had to guess, I would imagine. But um, something else that I've wondered about is that, and this goes back to what we were discussing earlier about how the psychic abilities work, and people don't understand them. Now, from everyone I've talked to, they say that it most people have their own type of ability, that it works a little differently for each person. So, and with you mentoring people and helping them develop their own abilities, combined with your own personal experiences. I was wondering, what are some of the different types of psychic abilities people have that you've encountered?
Well, the typical senses are seeing in your mind's eye, hearing either outside or inside your ears, feeling empathically, and just knowing things. But this can also expand into tasting and smell. And I'll try not to confuse people, but in terms of psychic development, it goes psychics, then mediums, and then channelers, meaning that mediums are also psychics and channelers are also psychic mediums. They all expand within the psychic abilities category as what animal communication, telepathy, and remote viewing.
Hmm. So that so that's quite a variety of abilities there. That and, and have you found that would you say a lot of people tend to have maybe just one of those, or have you encountered many people that have like a combination of those?
Most people have a combination. Um, Typically, the seeing, hearing, feeling are the three most common. The knowing, and some people do have the tasting and the smell.
Well, and seeing that's something that the tasting and the smell, that's something that I've not heard of. I'm unfamiliar with that, so I find that fascinating. So I can imagine that would probably not be one that you would want to have in some things that so the but
Well, it's kind of like going on paranormal investigation where you smell cigar smoke.
hmm
I'd relate it to like that.
wow, so that's definitely that's definitely fascinating because with the ability to see and to hear and to even sense these things, it's that that's amazing in itself. And then when you get into the whole realm of doing things like remote viewing, that is absolutely mind blowing. uh, I I can't even fathom how that would work, but there's so many documented cases of it that it works somehow with some people.
Right.
so this is what you're hearing. That tone of my voice is the sound of my mind being blown, for the record there. And this is this is why I've been looking so forward to this. Is I knew you would put me in this position to where I'm just it's like I said earlier, I feel like a kid in a candy store. I've got so many questions just racing through my mind that I wanted to ask you. Let me see. Something I something I was wanting to ask you about is if someone feels that they might have some type of ability, but perhaps they're not sure. What would be a good
Um,
way for them to determine if they do?
okay, so your main goal, if you want to determine if you have some type of ability, is to have someone validate your impressions. And again, they can come to you anyway, seeing, hearing, feeling, knowing. And a good way to do this is to hold a photo or an item that you have never seen and state your impressions and have the owner of that photo or item tell you what is accurate. And this way you can validate what you have and gain confidence
Hmm.
and determine. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's great advice. So really, it's just mainly a matter of what are you feeling from it, and and kind of go at it blindly, and just see how closely you're maybe zeroing in on it, I guess you would say. So that's that's awesome advice. Um, if someone is in that position and maybe they feel that they have some abilities, they want to learn more, they want to further develop them. What are some good resources they can turn to for more information, or maybe to find people to talk to that have similar abilities?
So I'd say the best resource we have is the internet because not every community has a spiritualist church or offers workshops.
Hmm.
So Facebook has several groups for psychic development, as does Yahoo Groups and Google Communities. And you can also look online for psychic development classes, blogs, and books.
Are there any particular authors that you would recommend, or any particular books?
I recommend, let's see, 140 psychic development exercises. I don't remember who the author is, but that has 140 psychic development exercises that you can do with yourself or with a partner or with a group. So that's a good start. And I think it's $2.99 on Amazon.
Oh, wow.
So it's an affordable price, yes.
And so that's basically a ton of exercises, and for $3, that's skip the coffee one morning, make it yourself, and you've got it covered.
Right.
So that's awesome information, and I agree. The Facebook, I've seen a couple of groups, and the internet. There's so many resources there itself, and that is handy because years ago, if you were maybe out somewhere in a rural area, or like with me, I'm in the South here in Alabama, and which anyone who didn't know that before probably has picked up that I was somewhere close to there from my accent.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't hide where I'm from. I'll put it that way. But in certain areas, like you mentioned, that's a great point, that there aren't quite as many resources. So the internet definitely would be a good way to go. Um, what Something I wanted to get your opinion on, and we had talked a little bit about this before we actually went on the air. Do you feel that psychics are useful with paranormal and criminal investigations?
Well, I'd like to mention that the FBI, the CIA, and police around the world are using psychics and mediums to help uh, cold cases and solve crimes. And there are criminal divisions from Australia, the United States, New Zealand, and the UK who all confirm that medium and psychics have abilities, and without their assistance, numerous cases would very likely have remained unsolved.
Wow.
Yeah, and with the television programs now, like some people watch Psychic Detectives or Sensing Murder, anyone can witness and watch just how useful psychics are in this case.
Hmm.
And also, I feel that psychics and mediums are an asset to paranormal research teams because they can offer information that cannot be detected by an instrument.
I agree.
So yes and yes.
I agree. That I I have on my paranormal team, we have two mediums, and they have, of course, their primary role is to be a paranormal investigator first and go through the more scientific approach. But I can't tell you how many times that using their abilities, they have empathic abilities of being able to pick up on emotions and hear things and see things, and it becomes so useful, and it just fascinates me. I've seen time after time again, like you had mentioned, FBI, CIA, and these different law enforcement agencies that have used psychics, and the case would be solved. And it's too many for it to be written up to mere coincidence. I,
Mm-hmm.
I actually shared a link on my team's Facebook page just not long before the show came on that was mentioning that the 10 of the most compelling cases that were solved with the assistance of psychics. And it was like you had mentioned, they they were saying that the law enforcement agencies themselves were saying that they did not believe these cases would have been solved had they not consulted with these psychics and had them available as a resource to assist them. So, it's fascinating. It's like I said earlier, it's absolutely mind blowing. What are there any other areas aside from the investigation itself that you would feel maybe with interrogating people or questioning people or working with the witnesses? Do you think a psychic could be useful with that aspect of it?
I feel it could be useful in profiling cases, looking at suspects, feeling whose energy they feel is, most likely to commit the crime, like that.
So, so that's yeah, I could definitely see that. Perhaps maybe picking up that emotion or that maybe that guilt or that anger that they're trying to hide. Maybe they could hide it
Hmm.
in body language, but if there's someone who has these empathic abilities, it's hard to hide that sort of thing from them.
Right.
So, so yeah, that's a great point. That's very good. Well, to someone that maybe has abilities and wants to better hone them in to use them, for perhaps they're interested in using them for a paranormal team or just wants to be able to use them in everyday life. What advice would you give them to help them sharpen those abilities and get them under control?
Well, first and foremost, you want to connect with people and find a practice partner to exchange readings or exercises with, and or a small group that meets by phone or online classroom. Here you'll find support from people with a common goal. You can also open a free psychic chat room to get comfortable giving readings. So first and foremost, you want practice.
Hmm.
Also, to start meditating, even guided meditation will help to raise your vibration and help you become more in touch with your intuitive nature.
Hmm.
And lastly, I suggest you consider removing fluoride from your daily routine because it calcifies on your pineal gland or your third eye, and this limits your inner vision and intuition.
Wow.
What I did was I switched to spring water because the trace amounts of fluoride are natural and only use fluoride-free products. And then for people who are interested in decalifying your pineal gland, um, there's several ways that you can do that. But again, what I did was a shot of raw lemon juice in the morning for 2 weeks and consuming a lot of cocoa, like in the form of 80 to 90% dark chocolate.
That, that's fascinating information. I'd never heard that about fluoride before. So that's
Yeah, you can see pictures of calified fluoride on pineal glands online, and there's lots of research on. Yeah.
wow. So that's definitely something that I'd never considered and learn something new every day. So wow, definitely something to consider to anyone listening who is looking to expand their abilities. If your water system is being, you know, maybe if they're adding fluoride to it, switch to the bottled fluoride-free water. It's see that is something that I would have never considered. Wow. That's so that just okay. You've blown my mind again. so so wow. Um, see but that's what I love though. Is I love for someone to pull something out of left field that I just absolutely do not see coming, and because I'm gonna be thinking about that all night tonight and probably half the day tomorrow. So, and I'll probably I'll probably be on Google on that for about till about 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's awesome stuff. I love it. Um, well, you know you've helped people. Obviously individuals who've came to you with their cases, and you've mentored others people to develop their own abilities. So, and I know that you're one of the co-founders of Across the Realms, and so I have to ask, do you have any events or team activities or anything else that you would like to mention, or anything going on to
Yeah.
help people?
Like you said, I'm one of 3 across the realm certified psychic mediums. All of our services are always under $20.
Hmm.
We have a free online psychic development group, Intuitive Pathways, on Facebook. We host a weekly spirit circle for mediumship development, and we accept volunteer sitters if any of your listeners are interested in having a group reading. We also hold a monthly psychic sweepstakes to win a reading of choice
Oh wow.
and publish a popular blog about everything psychic. And links to all these things can be found on our homepage, acrosstherealms.com.
Okay, that's awesome. And I can personally vouch for the Intuitive Pathways group. I'm a member of that group myself, and I I talk to people on a regular basis that come to me with questions because they know that me being in the paranormal field, they figure that I'm going to have contacts that have abilities, and I can't tell you how many people I've referred to the Intuitive Pathways group on Facebook, and every time I go in there, I'm always fascinated. There's so much good information, and the people in there. It's such a great atmosphere. It's all about learning. It's all about helping people, and just the way everybody gets along and works together in that group. I've got to put in my personal endorsement for that group. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So there's definitely some very awesome people in there.
Thank
And
you.
well, you're quite welcome. And you see, we're getting close to running out of time, but are there any last thoughts that you have that you'd like to maybe throw out there, or any advice that you would like to give to anyone before we wrap up?
Yeah, I wanted to touch base on the idea of becoming addicted to psychics. Psychic dependency is an unhealthy trend that's occurring more and more, especially with the convenience of online psychic hotlines. And our goal is not to enable people to feel like they cannot wait for a situation to work itself out. So I would just like to go over the signs that you might be addicted to psychics.
Excellent.
One being if you go psychic hopping, meaning that you ask several psychics the same questions without making any changes in your life. If you are consulting with a reader regularly about anything and everything. If you've ever made an emergency call or visit with a psychic. If other people are telling you that you have a problem. Or if you're spending more money than you can afford on psychics. Intuitive guidance can be helpful when you need to make a decision, but it comes problematic when you feel as though you can't make any decisions about running it by a psychic first. And I'd like to share a story. I had a client that did all of these things and was consulting with me daily. And what I did was I encouraged him to purchase and use a pendulum when he had day-to-day questions. And there was a learning curve where he'd want to compare his pendulum answers to mine, but shortly after, he was able to trust himself and wean away from the daily readings. So I make this suggestion to anyone that is struggling with psychic dependence, and because it's a good tool to keep in your toolbox.
Right. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and also just suggesting that you set your intention to go without a reading for a set period of time, and or reach out to an alternative, such as a crisis hotline or a counselor to help if need be.
That's an excellent point there, because like you had said, that I have seen people that get into this pattern myself, and that is so true. They, like the psychic hopping that you mentioned, they feel like they aren't satisfied with what one psychic tells them, so they go to another and to another, and it's like you mentioned, they're, on down there, it's like they're still doing the same exact things, but they're expecting different results, and they're getting the same information from these different psychics, doing the same things, and it's like this cycle, and it becomes like an insanity, and you watch them, and it really eats away at them, and it forms that dependence that you talked about. It's something that I'm so glad you brought up, because it can be really, this is something that I have seen marriages end over this, and jobs lost. It can be a very serious problem, a literal addiction, where
Absolutely.
like you mentioned, people feel like they can't make day-to-day decisions without consulting with the psychic, and God forbid they get with one of the psychics like you were mentioning earlier, who's running a scam, who's charging them for each visit an ungodly price only to sell them this charm or that charm, or tell them that they're going to make this potion, or who's just milking them for every bit of money that they can get, and knows what they're doing and intentionally do it. This, it can be just an absolutely devastating situation for that person. So,
And your family, yeah. It's just like an addiction to a drug, or, yeah.
absolutely, and that is great advice. If you find yourself in that situation, to contact a crisis hotline or a counselor, because it's nothing short of, as you said, an addiction. So, great advice. Thank you for bringing that up. So, yeah. Well, we're running down to just a couple of minutes. So before we get to the end of the show, let me get you to go ahead and once again, tell our listeners how they can get in touch with your group and some of the resources that you have out there, that should they be interested in finding one of your groups or your website, and kind of throw that information there for them.
Sure. If anyone Googles Across the Realms, will pop up, and our homepage has all the links. But our free online psychic development group, if you search Intuitive Pathways on Facebook, you'll find us. And what we do on that group is we have every Friday's reading day, so members give and get readings on the wall, and it's a closed group, so everything you say is discreet. It's not shared with any of your friends or family. And we also have on Sundays, which the information comes from within Intuitive Pathways, the weekly Spirit Circle for Mediumship Development, and that's an online classroom with call-in options. And normally we have prayer, meditation, and then we have a volunteer sitter, like I was saying. You can contact us, and we'll have you come in and have spirit contact, and the students read for the sitter, and that way they get validation from the reading and get to practice their mediumship skills. And again, all of our services are always under $20. Psychic, mediumship, animal communication readings by phone, email, and chat. And we have an ongoing monthly psychic sweepstakes to win a reading of choice. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks for putting that out there. That's a lot of resources there. So it looks like we're out of time, but thank you so much, Holly, for coming on the show. I can't speak for anyone else, but I know I have learned a lot tonight. So thank you.
I'm so glad, and thank you for having me.
And I hope that I can get you on the show again sometime.
I would love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you to everyone who's tuned in tonight, and I hope that you've enjoyed the show as much as I have. So we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you for listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team, brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network. We hope you enjoyed the show, and will tune in again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please be safe as you're out there, especially if you're investigating the paranormal. Take care, have a good night, and happy huntings. Thank you again from the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal.